Yeah, Stefan, thank you so much for having me and your amazing Hill House. Um, we just did a tour of Hill House where I showed us the several
Structures, yeah.
And now what I would like to know is, you have a lot of different interests, a lot of different things going on. What I would like to know is, how do you put all these together? Or other way around, how did it all come together? How did it start?
So I think we're at Hill House, and we're on a structure that there's 8 different structures, all different, and each one functions like a chessboard. They do different things, and they can do multiple things. And I think I built an art business that functions in a very similar way. The traditional art business is very linear and expected in its ambitions, its outcomes, its desires. And I've had to sort of think about building a structure to support artists, to distribute art, to generate revenue and income that's completely different, not completely different, but has different aspects to the traditional business. And I think Hill House is an aesthetic expression of that. It's sort of a aesthetic physical manifestation of that. There's 8 separate buildings. They're all disjointed, but they all can come together. They're all linked with a pathway. Different people can do different things in different zones. We're in a room that is an office space during the day and an exhibition space when there's an exhibition. You're in the front room, which is which we call it the garage, but it's an exhibition space. There's audio equipment everywhere, as you notice, where you can listen to beautiful music. Kind of, make art inhabit a living and working space instead of this sort of static environment that you go to. The artwork is static and objectified and commodified in its sort of perfect state. And I think out of necessity and creativity, we've been forced to develop a very different structure for how business operates. For a number of reasons. One, I have not accepted what I call the rules of the game. There's like a rule book you get when you enter the art business, and you're like, boom, and every business has a rule book, and it's different to a set of laws. It's more a rule book that defines social engagements within a group of people who participate in a business. It has nothing to do with the legal operation of the business. In fact, sometimes it's in contravention of the legal operation of a business. It's like a code. And when I read that book, proverbially read the book, I was like, there's a lot of stuff, this book doesn't make sense to me. So I kind of took it and I'm like, I threw it in the dustbin. I'm like, I'm going to write my own book of rules, and I'm going to engage with artists and culture in a way that I see fit and I think is better, more equal, more humane, more open, less homogenized, a heterodox approach as opposed to an orthodox approach to the business. And slowly, systematically, we've done this. You met me 15 years ago when I was really at the beginning of that journey, always trying to do things that were ambitious, large scale, and this is where we are today. And I think the core innovation that we've made around 2014-15, I was approached by Ted Shervin, who was an old friend of mine, who was a very powerful movie agent, talent agent, packaging agent, packaged shows like Cheers and Friends, and one of the most successful TV agents of all time. And he had taken over a company called ICM, and they moved into these offices and they needed work. And Mark Selwyn, generously, a very traditional gallerist in LA, basically realized that there was no ways he could service them because they needed 800 works of art. And he introduced me, said to Ted they should speak to me, and they called me, and I ended up renting them art for their offices in Los Angeles, in New York. And this was really the beginning of an innovative business called Creative Art Partners that I founded with a partner of mine named Brian Ludlow, which today has hundreds of people renting art from us in different divisions. and thousands of works in the field being rented, seen, distributed in an efficient way. Really looking at the cost structure is how can you get people art very inexpensively. So really the polar opposite of the art world, where you try and capture huge margins. How do you provide a service using art and really make razor-thin margins from that service, but do it at volume and try to get art outside of the, not necessarily outside of the establishment, but into people's homes where they don't have to think about it as an important financial decision every time they buy a work on paper or a painting. And I think what's happened in the art business, as things have gotten more expensive and galleries have focused on servicing an increasingly partisan community of wealthy versus non-wealthy people, so they've customized their art solutions to extremely expensive art that they rather sell to the very people with a lot of money because they make a bigger margin, because the cost structure is so bloated. The art fair structure, the gallery structure. You open a small gallery, you need a bigger gallery. You open a bigger gallery, you need a bigger gallery. You need a bigger gallery, you need a mega gallery. And this is why, the artists have this idea that by moving from a small gallery to a big gallery, your career is enhanced. I don't believe any of this to be true. And I also don't believe that the big galleries represent, exhibit, or show the best art in the world. I think quite the opposite, in fact. I think art is so illegible and so difficult to read for most people because it's a language that's very difficult to understand, that money has been the mechanism through which the system makes art legible. And the irony of the system is it's built on a post-war structure that's very linear. The institutions give art its value by recognizing them and showing them. The big galleries service the institutions, the writers service the galleries and the art fair. But somehow in the 80s, when money and capital loosened up and began to invade the business, these apparatuses that were very useful in constructing the post-war history of art in an environment where there was less money and also the artists hadn't even produced yet, became infected and taken over by capital. As capital took over the markets, instead of getting rid of these institutional establishments, they just became transformed into something else. Institutions no longer became places of experimentation and exhibition and growth. They became essentially ratings agencies for artworks, like Goldman Sachs rates Ford, or they rate Nvidia, or buy Tesla, it's going up. The institutions and the board members, they sort of, and it's not in a conspiracy form, it began to basically become literally like Bear Stearns, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley's got a buy rating on Jonas Wood, and we're putting a sell rating on Mark Rocha, and that's their performance. And the galleries then, sort of use the institutions in service of their needs. This is what's happened. You have this sort of, as you have this global inequality, which I think is the greatest threat to the West, personally. I think it's a greater threat than China or Russia or anything. And I also believe, like on a political basis, what you see in Gaza and Ukraine, the conflicts around the world, they have their specific geographic specificity to them, but they all emerge out of one very core root: inequality. Poor people suppressed and rich people gaining power, huge amounts of private capital and private power, basically. And in the art world, this expresses itself in a homogenized, almost absurdist, ridiculous system of distribution today, where the art fairs and the dinners look like scenes from Hunger Games, and not the nice side of Hunger Games, like the cliched side of Hunger Games. And the self-awareness of the collecting class, the gallery class, the promoting class, has literally left the room completely. And what it's been replaced by is this sort of moralizing kind of do-gooding, like we're going to say one thing and do another. And what I'm really interested in doing is, how do we get the art out there? How do we cut through this jungle of capital? How do we use the system of capital because the capital system is the system that rules us, money does rule us. But how do you, as a Trojan horse, turn it upside down it's almost like when you give a kid medicine when kids are young, you don't give them, a pill. The pill is wrapped in it's pink or green and it's sweet, so they think they're eating bubble gum, but they're getting medicine. How do you give this apparatus the medicine it needs without it knowing that it's getting the medicine it needs? And the way you do that is with price. Instead of increasing the price and getting huge margins, you lower the price to such a degree that people don't need to be concerned with investing in art, whether it's going to appreciate ownership in art, using art as a trophy, but they'll get back to the roots of using art for what it does, which is it decorates things, it makes your life better, and it gives you ideas, but without forcing those ideas. So the art business says, art is not meant to be decorative. It's too ethnic. It's too feminine. It's meant to give you purpose and meaning. So they can get huge price structure and sell you stuff that is ugly. They've sort of taken like the vitamin C out of the orange juice and given you the red color. And I believe that by going back to the basics and being like, you know what? And this is why Hill House is so interesting, because the art lives within a lifestyle space, and a heavily curated lifestyle space where there's music and audio and furniture and sofas that sort of says, no, art's okay, you can live with it. Art can be decorative, it can provide a lifestyle component, but at the same time it can be that medicine. So this is sort of the aesthetic, intellectual representation of many of these ideas that I'm executing on the business side in our rental business, Creative Art Partners, our new audio business, Simco Audio, where we sell audio equipment and we manufacture some items directly. And then of course the exhibition side, gallery side, artist financing side, which is, and I don't even like to call it a management side, because I think the idea of managing artists is incorrect. It's a financing management system. There's no such thing as managing artists to take a percentage of their revenue. It comes with financing. And I know that there are people who have explored artist management without financing, like, we're going to pay your car insurance and get you a lawyer. Artists need capital. They're factories. That's all an artist is. An artist studio is an artisanal factory of production, and that factory requires financing. Something I've been doing probably since you met me or started learning how to doing. Very complex, because every artist has different structures, ways of working, personalities, disorders, orders, relationships. And that's kind of the meta picture of what we're doing.
Yeah, it's not only that. I mean, you brought together over the years so many different things, you can say, okay, but it feels homogeneous.
Yes.
It's not like this is something odd.
Yeah.
On the contrary, it's something that you miss sometimes from the regular galleries.
Yeah.
I mean, here you can really take your time to watch out all, and no one is watching over your shoulder, or you don't feel observed by someone.
Well, you don't feel that you're organized into a social group. So I think the white box, although it's been useful for creating context, what it does when you throw capital into the white box becomes an immediate empty social space in which, when you walk into the space, you immediately go to where power is, or where you perceive power to be, and everyone is visible to everyone. So I think we look at the white box, artists look at it, oh, I'm exhibiting my art, the only thing in the box is my art, this is the most important thing, I'm the most important thing. But what happens when you've injected money into it, and when I say money, excessive amounts of money, that white box no longer becomes a space for artists. It becomes a social space for hierarchy and social hierarchy. And the minute you walk into that room, you're organized. Heinrich Schmidt it suddenly becomes not the founder of Vernissage TV and the creator of 4,000 hours of art historical, the critical footage that he edited and has done not just for money, but as a labor for love, because you could have done things for more money. You become on this pecking order, because the only thing that's legible to people is how much money do you have. That's it. That's legible to everyone. It's a very easy thing to read. You can be 12 years old and you can have a guy next to a pile of cash. You can be 90 with a PhD. It's legible. So you immediately get put in your box. So you don't become Heinrich Schmidt from Vernissage. You become the weird Swiss guy that like people don't know. and then people aggregate to pass. So you organize, so you feel uncomfortable because you can't sit, there's no space, there's no relax, and you're disconnected from the art almost immediately. That's why you leave these gallery spaces, and 95% of people feel like shit. 5% of people look good because Mr. Kordansky's giving you attention, Mr. Gagosian's giving Jeff Bezos attention, Mr. Zwirner's smiling upon you, but there's no grace, there's no gratitude, there's very little equality of treatment and equality of space where you're not observed. No one is observing you here. You are in a space whereby you can interact in a way privately and intimately and have someone come in. So I think you can look at the white box space no longer as a space for artists, but a space for organizing power, capital, and social hierarchy. And this is the shift. And this happened because of this extreme, extraordinary dislocation in society of inequality, which is present now in almost every engagement in the system. How do you reverse that? And I think these are questions like on a meta level I'd like to try and answer.
I think it's a genius idea to focus on audio. You know, it goes very well.
Yes.
To watching art, because you can really relax. You can listen to the music sound for maybe half an hour,
yeah.
maybe an hour, and you can take your time and then watch, comfortably the art, and then it's much better experience than if you walk in a white box and you're okay. Most people, they spend 5 seconds in a white box and then they go out.
Yeah, it distracts you. It engages you. Again, the one thing that is very legible to people is music, because it's a language that we all understand. We live with it as children. You know, people know how to read music almost as well as they know how to read money, which is a good thing. And I think associated by providing music, it fills the empty space. And even if you're alone in a room with music, you are having a conversation and you're not alone. You're not being watched because you're listening. And I think one of the things that's interesting watching is I sometimes don't even tell people, this is so-and-so, sit down, listen. And then 20 minutes later, who's that artist? I really like it. You don't have to tell them. Like I went to a gallery. I can be somewhat. I went to a gallery, and the first thing I walked in, like the gallerist sort of walked up to me and gave me a PDF and said, "This is so and so, and he's in the museum show at da 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 da." Like I'm like, I haven't even had a chance of looking at the work, and you haven't even asked me if I like the work. It's just like. Because if I say I don't like the work after you've told me this work was just exhibited in 3 museums, I sound like a moron. So immediately they've like put me in this. So if I don't like the work and he's told me this, I can't even tell the truth because it's this. So I think letting people discover work, engagement, flipping everything upside down on its head, like disrupting that like linear transaction point, which is interesting.
What I also like is, I think you also have residencies. Well, give residencies here, but also in South Africa. Yeah,
we do. We have a couple of residency programs. We actually have, you met Cameron Platter, who arrived today. You should interview him before you leave. He's in MoMA, he's an amazing artist. He's here for a month on residency. We have a gallery and a residency space in Pasadena, 5 minutes away from here, so artists can stay here, work there. We have the Cape Town Art Residency that's run by David Altman, who's here. Maybe you could interview him and Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson's my lead designer. He designs all the creative assets for us. Cameron Platter is an amazing artist. He's here, just came in last night, and David Altman runs that. And we do something interesting in South Africa, is we bring in international artists from England to South Africa. So it's not just there to get African artists working, it's also there to bring people, foreign artists to Africa to engage. It's a great program. It's very beautiful. David should speak to you about it. So we have that. We have the residency program here, and then we articulate residencies in other places as well.
You also have editions.
We have an editions business. Yeah, these actually are all editions that we produced. This is a UV dimensional edition, which is textured. This is just a print. This is a screen print. So we have an editions business. We We've done a number of editions. They don't sell particularly well, but you know, I have built a business where I don't need to sell art to stay in business. And this is the trick, because selling art to this class of people is extremely difficult. And difficult in the sense that in order to do so, you need the ratings agencies, the institutions, and the art fairs on board. And if you don't have their buy-in, you're in trouble. And I will never, ever fight for their buy-in. I will never degrade myself to their obsequiousness and their structures. I'll build my own business, my own distribution system. It'll be parallel to the system, and eventually I believe it'll be big enough that it will become the new system. And that's my goal. See if I can execute it, or if I'm Don Quixote from, you know, chasing windmills. History will tell.
Another question, I mean, I think you have an economics background.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about that. Did you were you immediately in the beginning were you from the start interested in art, or first in economics, and then how did
I was always interested in art. My mother's an artist. I always took pictures. When I was young, I wasn't really interested in art. I'm from South Africa. It's not like you don't think I'm going to be I mean, at least then. I was interested in the movie business. I went to boarding school in Connecticut when I was 15, went to Stanford undergrad. And when I was at Stanford, I was bored. So they had laser discs then, and I started watching movies. A friend of mine went to film school. He was a year ahead of me, gave me some John Woo movies, you know, the Hong Kong action. I started watching watched movies. I fell in love with movies, and I decided to go to AFI and make movies. So I think the movie business happened first. Then I got into this company called Wire Image, and I sort of learned distribution, content, and art was always in the background, but always inaccessible. Then I lived in New York. I worked for a guy. I helped him run his family money, and I'd start going to galleries. I go to Jeffrey Deitch every day. It was around the corner, and that's when the art business sort of started to but it came much later. I never even imagined it as a business. And also when I was 19, I was best friends with an older gentleman named Jim Corcoran. He's a famous dealer of Ed Ruscha. He was partners with Mnuchin in New York, C&M Arts. He bought all the Mark Rothkos. So it was there, and I was friends with Ruscha in my early 20s, and I met the guys, but it took me a lot of time before that became, you know, some people, they know exactly what they want to do. I think what happened to me is like I assembled a bunch of skills in different businesses that were all content related, all distribution related, all creative related, and they kind of like slowly like came together. I was telling someone yesterday that like the way for me business works, I have an impulse, an instinct, a feeling, and it's like really blurry. It's like being in a jungle and you just see like a little light here, and slowly you cut through and you see more light, but it's still not clear. But you go forward, and then it kind of opens up and it's clear. Like your instinct kind of guides you to it. I tell my son who's 16, you know, he's like, I'm like, don't worry about what you do. And he asks good questions. People ask him what he wants to do in life. And what's so wise about him, he starts talking about what values he wants to have. He doesn't talk about what he wants to do, but he immediately starts describing the values he wants to have in his life. He doesn't talk about what, but the values. You build the values, and then you can build the what. And I say to him, you exercise for this, you learn this for this, but it doesn't have to come together for a purpose. It'll form itself into a structure that you will implement as you get older. It'll come together. So for me, the path, it kind of, I've always been aesthetic. I've always loved beauty. I've always loved ideas, everything around cultural content. And then figuring out in a world really where culture is, especially in America, where everyone wants to do everything cheap and at scale, there's really, and I've always thought this, there's a war on culture. It's like, and it's always frustrated me because in businesses, even the audio business, the art business, everyone fights with each other over this sort of small business instead of figuring out how to expand the business and be innovative with your product offerings and try to get the culture out there. Like how do you expand the culture? Not how do you service the billionaire, but how do you expand it? And I think that's interesting to me. Like, what kind of steps can you take in business to make things, and I don't like the words democratizing art or making it more accessible, but how do you make the process engageable for more people, many more people? And it'll never be something that's engageable for everyone, but even engageable amongst the elites, because most of the elites aren't interested in it. So within the elites, you have a huge structure in which to expand, and there's, within the elites, there's the poor, the rich, and the middle.
You talked about values. That leads me to another question. You ran for Senate.
I ran for United States Senate.
Why did you do that?
My friend, I have this friend, Jack Kimball, he works with me, he's a really smart guy, and he said, Dianne Feinstein's giving up her seat, she passed, it's an open seat, it's called a jungle primary, and it was just one opportunity where I could do it. And I figured I'd just try it, like, why not? One life to live, to see how it works, no chance of winning, but in life, you do things not to win, you do things to do things. And it was a really interesting process. I like learning, and I feel like learning is a contact sport. You want to learn how a turntable works, buy a vintage turntable. You learn how a phonostage works, buy the wrong phonostage. Put the wrong needle. You want to learn how something works, try it, you break it, you send it. You want to learn about records, go buy records, go to the swap meet, and it's like it's very much about, like, if I'm going to vote for someone, if I'm going to have an opinion, by doing it you learn a lot, so you become informed, and it helped me a lot in forming a lot of my opinions, and I really do believe, like, the greatest threat to democracy is inequality. I can't tell you how much I believe that. It's something that has destroyed nations, empires in the past, and I love America. I love South Africa. It's my home. I want to contribute. I'm relatively, 54, but young. And I think, I don't know what the future brings, but I have a strange feeling I'm going to build a very, very big business, and a very interesting business that engages with people in a very different way. And I want to do this practice run maybe in my 60s, when I have more capital, more resources. Maybe I can figure out how to and this, I constantly learn. At UCLA, met Cal Restiola from the Burkle Center, trying to just keep myself educating current. So if something happens, if I'm called for something that I need to do, I'm ready for it. I may never be called, but I'm ready. And also, I'm interested in Lao Tzu, Confucian, early Confucius writing, which is the path of learning, and the idea from early Confucian philosophy is that in life, learning is not something you do because you have a goal. Like in America, everything you do is like, well, how are you going to make money from that? What's the purpose? It's part of what you should do in life. The walking the path is more important than the destination. And Lao Tzu is and that sort of path of learning is very important to me. And I think it then informs every aspect of your life, everything.
You said you're waiting for the opportunity, but did you have an idea what to do next? In this.
In the political arena.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, it's blurry. It's blurry, but I feel. It's instinctive. I feel something's coming. I don't know what, but I think the art world has taken, I believe, a very hostile approach to my activities, and which has been very helpful to me because it's made me very well known in the art world with little expense for marketing. I haven't had to go to art fairs. I haven't had to do the same things. But I think life is strange, and I just have this instinct that at some point something's going to call upon me to do something really serious. And when that happens, I want to be prepared. It may never happen, but somehow in the back of my head, it's there for some reason.
And until then, you have this great.
Until then, I
space.
have this. Yeah,
It's really impressive.
yeah. Thank you so much.
I also spoke to several artists here and also visitors, and they are really blown away because this is really a unique experience.
Thank you.
And it's such a great space to relax, you know, to not think about anything.
Yeah.
And if you happen to think about something when you're here, listen to music and have a look at the painting, and it happens, as you said, you know.
Yeah,
So
it happens.
It comes naturally. And
Yeah.
It's nothing that you don't feel any pressure to behave in a different, certain way.
Yeah, you can be home, and you've been here for hours. I mean, you guys came here at what, 11?
Yeah.
And you're like, you know, and you see a lot of people. It's just, it's very nice. Give people time, provide them an experience that's sort of holistic and organic. Yeah.
Stefan, thank you.
My
Thank
pleasure.
You so much. Do you have something that you want to add?
Do I have something I want to add? Not really. I just want to be in service.
I almost said, do you have a political statement to? But,
No, it's not.
I think-
It's not a I want to be in. I want to see a fairer world where I think culture is very important, because I think it enables people a pathway to creative thinking, better thinking, more logical thinking, and that's my calling. So I want to figure out that mousetrap, and you know, we're figuring it out slowly, maybe not so slowly.
Okay, hey, thanks so much.
Thank you, Heinrich. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I just want to say, my political statement is watch Vernissage TV. It's an amazing resource.
Thank you.